we are back with Council Bill 42.
Mike.
Oh, Mike.
Introduced by
Now
Christian
we can't hear.
Mercer Rigby and Deb Young, co-sponsored by Opal Jones and Liz Walsh, an act to alter the school facility surcharge in accordance with Chapter 744 of the Acts of the General Assembly of 2019 and generally relating to the school facilities surcharge. So you may want to start with amendment number.
Oh, I got to get it off the table. I got to get it off the table. I move to take from the table Council Bill 42.
Second.
Please call the vote to remove it from the table.
Got it. Ms. Mercer Rigby.
Yes.
Dr. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Young.
Yes.
Ms. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Youngman.
Yes.
Council Bill 42 is removed from the table. I move to approve Council Bill 42.
Second.
So I guess we'll do a brief sort of reintroduction to where we are, but essentially the social contract is really one that everyone contributes to regardless of usage. And residents contribute through property and income tax, visitors contribute through sales taxes, and school surcharge fees pay for school infrastructure that's generated and needed by new construction. Councilwoman Young and I and all of my colleagues have worked incredibly hard on this, and we're very appreciative of everyone, especially the auditors and the Office of Laws and the drafters. Very, very difficult work on this.
So in order to create a fee structure that allows the school district to keep up with the fastest growing student population in the state, we looked at the school construction needs over a 10-year period, the funding coming from the county and state, determined that there was a shortfall in school construction of approximately $36 million per year. Then we looked at the percentage of students coming from new construction, and based on that, created a formula that determined $6.80 would raise the funds needed to create adequate infrastructure. And when I say $6.80, I mean $6.80 per square foot would be the new impact fee for new construction. This was a thoughtful and well-researched formula that we have spent months reviewing. This will raise much-needed funds for our schools, and I hope that as a council we can show Howard County that we are truly supportive of our education partners. All right, so we're going to start with an amendment that is going to be introduced from the dais. And I'm going to ask Ms. Schwartz-Jones to read this amendment, and then we can take a vote on whether or not to consider it from the dais.
Okay, and we will, for ease of reference for everyone, refer to this as amendment number 7, which would add a new section 4 on page 6 of the bill as introduced after line 26, which would read, the rate established in paragraph 2 of this subsection shall be adjusted for inflation in accordance with the Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers published by the United States Department of Labor for the fiscal year preceding the year for which the amount is being calculated. The adjustment may not reduce the rate below $1.32 per square foot.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz-Jones. And just to give a little more background on this particular amendment, the indexing that is contained in this amendment was contained in the original impact fee surcharge in our county code for the last 15 years. And in the course of all the various legislative drafting that we were doing over the last 3 months, we realized that somehow it got left out, so we put it back in, and that is the genesis of this particular amendment. So now I would move to vote on this.
Right.
Oh, discussion first?
Yeah, we need to discuss.
Okay.
So if I could just back the truck up. So in order for the council to discuss
Do we have
the
to-
amendment,
We have to
it needs
vote
to be
to-
moved and seconded as to a late file.
Right.
I will
And then
second it.
and that requires 4 votes. And then after that, you can move to approve the amendment, get a second, and then you can have a debate on the substance.
Thank
All
you.
right, so we have to introduce this very important piece regarding CPI.
Right.
So let's call the vote on this late file amendment.
So I move
I
to.
seconded it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
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 Thank you very much. I'm very glad that it has been introduced. So you can move
So
to
now,
approve?
so now I move to approve the amendment, and
Second.
and now we can discuss. There we go.
And this is going to go in as Amendment 7?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Is there any discussion regarding the CPI?
No? Okay.
All right, let's call the vote on Amendment 7.
The chair seconded.
Yes.
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 Great. All right. So we have Amendment 1. Let's move to approve Amendment 1.
Second.
And then we have an amendment from the dais that Dr. Jones and I have worked on a lot today. And I'm grateful because he pointed out that some of the other affordable housing amendments do not cover a unique affordable housing definition in our code or within the DRAs, and those are the units within downtown.
Yes, so the affordable units, as was stated by Madam Chair, we wanted to make sure was included. And this would set, well, I guess we gotta move it, we gotta move it first.
Yep. Well, our bad. I can see Gary hovering.
Yeah.
Sorry very much. So we move
So
this
once you
one.
move and second the amendment, then you're free to debate it
But
after that.
can we amend the amendment at this point?
I believe what you've offered,
Yes.
if not moved, is Amendment 1. Or I guess Amendment 1
Amendment
to
1
Amendment
to
1.
Amendment 1.
And so that needs to be moved, it needs to be second, and then you can debate it.
Okay. I move Amendment 1 to Amendment 1 to Council Bill number 42, 2019.
Second.
All right. All right, so now we can discuss Amendment 1 to Amendment 1. And everyone should have the fiscal analysis as well as, from the auditors, as well as the amendment itself.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understand this. My understanding of Amendment 1 was it was providing an incentive for development to provide more than the required
Yes.
MIHU housing.
Yes.
And so to the extent that additional housing was provided above and beyond the county requirements, then a lower rate would apply. And so how, I assume that then this additional language proposed in Amendment 1 to Amendment 1 is in that same vein? Is
Yes.
this,
So it's the sort of above and beyond units, but they are not through the zoning, they're through the previous agreements from the previous council.
but so they're not going above and beyond? If there's already a set requirement for them to provide a certain quantity or type of housing? That's the part I don't understand, is I thought as originally proposed Amendment 1, and that's why we couldn't get any kind of real fiscal impact analysis on it. It was an unknown. It was an incentive in the future that may or may not be taken up. Mr. Ingles' writing to us over the weekend was that it wouldn't, because it didn't provide enough of a financial incentive. Developers would just forego providing the above and beyond rate, even though it would qualify for, or I'm sorry, go above and beyond providing the MIHU units, because the lower rate still was not enough of an incentive. So I'm just trying to understand this, seeing this for the first time. How does an agreed number or types or arrangement of stock that's either in process or planned to be in place, is that analogous to the MIHU above and beyond that's the subject of Amendment 1?
Sure. So in Amendment 1 covers more along the moderate income housing units, whereas 2 and 3 are tax credits and tax credit based, which is why we put it along with Amendment 1. And then I think that Mr. Youngman has made a fair amount of impassioned arguments, at least to me, regarding master developers and 30-year agreements. And so this was the point where I could accept that if I want to support these units being built, then I'm willing to make a measure of investment in them.
No,
Oh, okay.
you look like you were about to say something, so
No,
I was listening intently. I was preparing to listen intently.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, affordable housing in downtown Columbia, whether it's next year, 5 years, 10 years, as our subject matter expert from the realty realm has told us, a 30-year developer dealing with downtown Columbia, dealing with affordable housing, we want to make sure that those continue to get built and that affordable housing isn't hurt in any part of the county, if you ask me.
Oh, they don't, I can't remember if I mentioned this or not, but they don't fit any other definition of affordable. So this will wrap it in.
And this seems to me to be, the taxpayers being willing to, provide some subsidy to a developer that's willing to go beyond its requirements for affordable housing, and that's great. But I feel like it's apples and oranges from just sort of the normal, everything that the master developer has committed to. Like the other amendments we're talking about tonight, I feel like this is separate. This is a kind of a standalone, hey, if you're willing to do more affordable housing, that's great, and we're willing to do our part in, letting you pay 1/3 the impact fee. And I read Mr. Engel's email too. It's got to provide some incentive. Maybe not.
Councilmember Youngman, I would disagree with you. I don't think taxpayers are willing to subsidize development any more than they already have. I think that's the point of this increase in the school impact charges. And again, if this Amendment 1 to Amendment 1 is rolling into an exemption, stock, types, numbers of units that already have been the subject of some pre-agreement, I don't think it falls into the same agreement or the same category as this future-looking, unquantified, above and beyond thing. They're not going above and beyond if they're doing it in accordance with some existing agreement. So where did this come from?
So it says 2. It says what exists right now in Amendment 1 and excludes downtown Columbia. And then it adds an additional provision for the inclusion of downtown Columbia under those definitions. So that way, when a project is being built, it's being built at the other rate.
Okay. I'll bring this up again when we get to Amendment 4. This bill was introduced in August. We've had many work sessions, many hours of work sessions, public testimony on this. Columbia Development District is not my wheelhouse, so it's not something that I am able to kind of absorb on the fly and understand and have some, deep feeling one way or the other. So I am, with this and with later coming Amendment 4, I'm at a loss to understand why this kind of technical proposal is being advanced at this point.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I just want to make clear, and I might not have been clear before, that I was delineating between sort of that decision if the county was wanted to subsidize or elected to subsidize over and above affordable housing. Not that I thought that it was a good thing, because affordable housing generates a lot of kids. So, just I wasn't advocating for the policy as much as delineating that this wasn't the same as giving downtown Columbia, that's committed to a 30-year development plan, some sort of different treatment. I feel like this is a different animal.
Well, and I think you've made the point many times that it's the number of bedrooms, not necessarily the existence of affordable housing, because surely studio affordable housing isn't generating many kids out of a studio apartment.
Build them all day long.
So just wanted to make sure that was clarified. As I can't let that go. So let's call the vote for Amendment 1 to Amendment 1.
Ms. Mercer-Rigby?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Young?
Yes.
Ms. Walsh?
No.
And Mr. Youngman?
We're voting on the amendment to the amendment, right?
Yes.
Amendment 1
Yes.
to Amendment 1.
Yes.
All right. Amendment 1 to Amendment 1 passes. I feel like we discussed both. That's the general. So let's vote on Amendment 1 as amended.
Okay. Ms. Mercer-Rigby?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Young?
Yes.
Ms. Walsh?
No.
Mr. Youngman?
No.
Amendment 1 to Council Bill 42 passes. Okay. Let's. Sorry, if I could just ask for clarification. I think my brain has actually died. Do we need to move the amendment, or do we move the amendments to the amendments first?
First you move the amendment.
Right, and then
you
okay.
move an amendment to the amendment.
Sorry. Sometimes it's
out of
which way you roll
backwards
it.
in your book.
And then, okay, thank
See
you.
what the issue is.
Okay. So I'd like to move Amendment 2.
Second.
And Amendment 2 alters the rate for affordable housing that is non-senior residential new construction, and the way it currently reads is applied for or received funding from the state of Maryland or from the county as affordable housing project after December 31st, 2020. But on that note, I'd like to move. And so one thing that I think is important to say is I think there's been a lot of misinformation out about this one, but this is really an investment of about $450-ish, $100,000 a year, and that's in over 10 years, and that's for the investment of affordable housing, which does result in improved student stability. It results in all the things that we talk about as goals for the county, and I personally and professionally think it's a very important investment for our county to take.
Well, and I think we do need to reinforce the fact that it is the policy of this county, it is the desire of this county to provide affordable housing. We need workforce housing. We need places where people can live, where they can afford to live, who work at our hospital, who work in our schools, who work in our retail, all the retail areas in all over Howard County. And it's very hard to provide that housing if we don't have some sort of incentives and or some sort of rate that's more affordable for developers to actually build that type of housing. And so that was part and parcel of our thinking in developing amendments 1, amendment to amendment 1, amendment 2, amendment to amendment 2, and amendment 3. I'm just saying
Oh, yes,
overall.
I was like, wait.
Just no, just the overall reasoning behind these first 3 amendments that we're going to be discussing was to encourage affordable housing and to find ways that we could help people do this, help developers and nonprofit housing developers as well, who are out there trying to build affordable housing.
Aren't we going to get?
Oh, wait, yeah.
Are we in discussion, right?
I don't know. I think we need to move Amendment 1 to Amendment 2 and Amendment 2 to Amendment 2, and then
okay.
I think it would be easier and give Gary less stress.
Yeah, the only amendment before the council right now is just Amendment 2. None of the amendments to that amendment so far have been moved and seconded.
Yeah. So let's move Amendment 1 to Amendment 2.
Second.
This eliminates a potential applied for loophole. We heard some concerns that someone could sort of make phony applications or make other applications for these tax credits, and we want these to really be going to projects that absolutely need the assistance in financing. And so this eliminates that potential loophole. And then
Number 2. I move approval of Amendment 2 to Amendment 2 to Council Bill 42, 2019.
Second.
This amendment and 3 more that District 1 has sponsored or will be sponsoring this evening go to the methodology and the inputs that this council undertook to reach the original 680 bill rate. And so what we've done for a number of these amendments is propose an adjustment to the original bill rate so that the target revenue still is recouped, again, using all the same methodologies and inputs. And so in this case, were we to exempt this certain category of affordable housing, we can ensure that the school's capital budget would still be funded to the same extent were we to increase the rate from 680 up 7 cents to 687.
And through that, we're essentially making new construction be the sole payer for the affordable housing of the county benefit that the county would be investing in. Only the new construction would be in the source of that investment. Is that correct?
I don't know what you're saying. We would be achieving a $205 million revenue over 10 years as we all, or at least the majority of us, agreed we were targeting.
Right. So we'd be investing about $450,000 a year in making sure that less people are homeless.
Again, I don't know.
I know we view it differently, but I some things I can't let go. And usually that's kids.
We're going to do this 3 more times.
Okay. Here we go on the rodeo. All right. Any further discussion on amendments to Amendments 2 or Amendment 2 itself?
I'd just like to toss in that, there's a lot of different competing policies in the county. And I don't mean pros and cons and moving parts that aren't necessarily a policy. I mean affordable housing policy, school construction policy. And it's going to be really, really hard every time we have a discussion about funding for schools if every single time we try to exempt affordable housing. It happened during Apfo a couple years ago. It just seems like that's a priority in and of itself, and the county needs to figure out a way to handle that in and of itself without taking money away from school construction.
I think you're right that the county needs to handle it, which is why I'm very excited that the master housing plan has gotten kicked off. It's absolutely an issue, and I'm glad to see the county executive tackling it. But I think there are also the issues that if every time you say you erect every time you pass a policy, you erect a higher and higher and higher barrier for affordable housing, then at some point it doesn't really matter because you've erected so many barriers and it's still not getting achieved. So why add new barriers in? And I think that has been a lot of our concern, that there's no single silver bullet, but why would we increase barriers to ensuring that people are stably housed?
And I would also like to add that while, well, number one, that affordable housing is not exempt from an increase. One of these amendments does increase the affordable housing per square foot rate to 1/3 of what the new rate will be.
One.
Yes, and I also think it's important to note that there are a number of surrounding counties that do not charge a development fee. So I think that in charging a low development fee, we are recognizing that there are a lot of students who come from affordable housing, and that as the fastest growing county in the state of Maryland, from a student perspective, we could use the revenue even if it is significantly less than what the developers will be paying on for-profit housing.
And again, this would go to not just 3-bedroom units, it would go to studios, to 1-bedrooms that notoriously have low student yields. So.
And I think those are the fine tunings of this that we could have accomplished, you know, given more time. But we could debate it all night. I'm not going to belabor it.
All right. Well, let's call the vote on Amendment 1 to Amendment 2 on Council Bill 42.
Ms. Mercer-Rigby,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Young,
Yes.
Ms. Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Youngman.
Yes.
Amendment 1 to Amendment 2 to Council Bill 42 passes.
Okay.
Wait.
Whoop.
Amendment 1 to Amendment 2 passed.
Yes.
And
Now we have Amendment
2
2 to Amendment 2.
Okay. Ms. Mercer-Rigby,
No.
Dr. Jones,
No.
excuse me, Ms. Young,
No.
Ms. Walsh,
Yes.
and Mr. Youngman.
No.
All right. Amendment 2 to Council Bill 42 fails. Amendment 2 as amended by Amendment 1. Let's call the vote.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just catching up with you. Ms. Mercer-Rigby,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Young,
Yes.
Ms. Walsh,
Yes.
and Mr. Youngman.
No.
Okay.
Find it. Okay. All right, I move to consider amendment number 3 to Council Bill number 42.
Second.
And, yeah, amendment number 3 would create a rate, a residential rate of 1/3. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the one that if a non-senior residential new construction project has applied for or received funding from the state of Maryland or from the county as an affordable housing project on or before December 31st, 2020, it will be exempted from the 1/3 extra surcharge in the amendment that we just passed. So this would give them an exemption from that until December 31st, 2020. And then after that, they would go up to the regular rate.
So this is basically
Grandfathering,
Grandfathering
right,
for
these,
folks that already have their
grandfathering
project on.
those projects, yes.
Right.
Yeah. Most of which I think we're already aware of. So should I go to amendment number 2?
Yeah, we got to
or amendment number 1. Yeah. All right, so
You want to move the 2 amendments to Amendment 3 so we can?
oh, yeah,
Knock
I'll
them
move
all out.
both amendments to amendment number 3. So I'll move amendment,
Let's just move amendment 1.
okay. All right, I'll move amendment number 1 to amendment number 3, which would change the wording to,
Can we get a second, please?
Thank you, Dr. Jones, our resident parliamentarian.
thank you. Did you get that? We have a second, okay.
I got it.
It would change the wording to applied for.
It
or,
strikes
to
the applied
strike
for.
it,
The same
yes.
loophole.
That loophole that we discussed earlier.
I move to approve amendment number 2 to amendment 3 to Council Bill 42, 2019.
Second.
And this, like the proposed amendment to to amendment 2 before it, this proposal changes the surcharge rate from 680 to 695 in order to recoup the funding loss by this proposed amendment. That is an increase of 15 cents.
All right.
Okay, so.
Any
I'll call-
discussion?
Oh, sorry.
All right, let's vote on Amendment 1 to Amendment 3.
Okay, Ms. Mercer Rigby,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Young,
Yes.
Ms. Walsh,
Yes.
and Mr. Youngman.
Yes.
All right, Amendment 1 to Amendment 3 passes. Let's vote on Amendment 2 to Amendment 3.
Ms. Mercer Rigby,
No.
Dr. Jones,
No.
Ms. Young,
No.
Ms. Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Youngman,
No.
All right, Amendment 2 to Amendment 3 does not pass. Amendment 3 as amended by Amendment 1. Let's vote on that.
Ms. Mercer Rigby,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Young,
Yes.
Ms. Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Youngman,
Yes.
All right, Amendment 3 as amended by Amendment 1 passes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was waiting for you to move us on. I apologize.
Not sure what's happening in 4 or 5 seconds.
I'd like to
so-
move Amendment 4 to Council Bill 42.
Second.
Can I explain?
Yep.
So this is a very controversial amendment that's received lots of discussion and debate around the office today and over the last couple of months. And it's different treatment for downtown Columbia. And folks might say, well, why does downtown Columbia get different treatment? Well, no other development in the county did a master developer sign on to a 30-year plan, front end, many community amenities, and base 30 years of development on a financial model. Every other year, we can't go and increase their costs. At some point, we need to look at Columbia Gateway, where we will need a large master developer to come in and commit to a 20 or 30-year process, and they need to know that when they sit down and look at their economics, they're not going to be moving target every other year. So I think this is a really important discussion for us to have, which is why I moved the amendment. Essentially, what it would do is it would discount the impact fee in downtown for units built in downtown Columbia to the 132 that we have now plus 50% of the increase. So if the increase if the rate is 732 at one point, their rate would be 432, if that makes sense. Did I describe that right?
Can I go? Before I move in the amendment that I have proposed to amendment number 4, I want to make sure that in your books you are looking at the correct number. The adder, in order to recoup lost funding by virtue of this exemption of the Howard Hughes properties.
Oh, wait, did you get a second?
So, I'm sorry.
Second. I'll second.
Thanks. The adder to exempt these properties is 49 cents, and so amendment number 1 to amendment number 4 would increase the school surcharge fee from $6.80 to $7.29.
Are we discussing it? So, are we discussing it?
Yes, it's been moved and seconded. Dr.
So,
Jones?
Yeah, really fast. There is no 680 in the, I know you mean the rate, so there's no 680 term in amendment number 4, but I'm assuming you're referring to the rate. Okay. So Gary, how would we rectify that with the quotations around 680 in amendment 1 to amendment 4? Even though we know what
It's
it
actually an
means.
amendment to the actual bill, wouldn't it be?
Oh, this
Well,
looks
it's
like
not
an amendment.
written,
It
but
looks- yeah, I think
it would need to be an
right.
amendment to the actual bill.
It looks like it's because it's referring to page 6, line 23.
It's amending,
The same
Amendment
section?
1 is amending Amendment 4 by inserting before line 1 in Amendment 4, the language which you see set forth in Amendment 1 to Amendment 4.
So now my question is, should this be a whole new amendment? Because the way it reads is not referring to Amendment 4, it's referring to the bill.
Well, on its face, Amendment 1 to Amendment 4 does refer to Amendment 4, and it says, looking at Amendment 4 on page 1, before line 1, insert, and then it says on page 6,
I see it.
in line 23, strike the 6. So it's amending
I see.
Amendment 4, which is amending the bill.
I see it. Sorry.
Crystal clear.
Got it. Got it. Thank you.
You know, everybody's doing math. I'm going to go ahead and add that, you know, Howard Hughes has contributed school sites. They have 130 plus community enhancements. They just renovated Meriwether Post Pavilion and handed ownership over to the county. And their student yield is about 1/10 of the average of everywhere else in Howard County. And I know somebody's going to jump in and say, this is a collective effort, and just because your neighborhood doesn't generate kids, you shouldn't have to pay the impact fee. But, you know, we've got exemptions for senior housing, and I just really think that if we want to continue down the road of attracting master developers to enter into multiple decades-long commitments where a lot of the community enhancements are contributed up front, we have to look at some precedent to keep as much of their costs stable as we can.
To clarify, we're forced to exempt senior housing.
By the state delegates.
state. I'm not sure-
State delegates and
We are
senators who
forced to
voted for it.
exempt
I just wanted to make that very clear.
We are
did
forced
not-
to exempt
We
it.
did not exempt senior
Right.
housing.
Yes, we were
No.
required.
Right, I get it.
And I think this is perhaps an important conversation to have, but I think it's a conversation that we should have had before the night of voting. Again, this bill was filed August 23rd. I went back and looked in our emails that we received as council to see whether or not Howard Hughes had even made a request for these kinds of exemptions, and
They
I
did
couldn't
testify.
find it. Deb Young forwarded something to our email. This should have been discussed. There should have been some presentation of these are the agreements that I've made, and these are the trade-offs, and these are the yields from my housing units. That didn't happen.
I agree.
It didn't
came-
happen. Why are we
I was
hearing about this for
notified
the
on
first time?
Thursday
Wait,
evening.
one at a time.
Yes, yep.
Well,
I
Dr.
do-
Jones?
Go ahead.
So really fast, in the public hearing in September, I remember there being a testimony about it. I also remember some conversations in work session. But I also want to say overall that yes, it is best when we see things and we see PowerPoint slides and different things when discussing. But I think every month, just about every month, one, if not more of us, have dealt with amendments after public hearing. So if we're talking about just dealing with things we can discuss, I'm cool with that. Then we need to do that for everything.
I would say
Go on.
amendments are the result of,
Right,
in
and
theory,
that too,
are the
and that
result
too.
of conversations between council members, information you hear from public testimony, and then information discussed at work sessions. So an amendment can come from any one of those avenues, or emails that people send, or Joel Hurwitz, who I saw earlier, will send us an email, and he's often a reference for amendments.
And in a perfect world, folks, we would keep this on the table, and we would keep working on this. This is a policy that affects hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of school construction money, private development money, our county's economy in the short term, our budget next year. But we committed to the public that this was going to a vote tonight. So while it's a little sloppy, we're doing what we committed to do.
The auditor's analysis is that the impact of amendment number 4 will be a loss of $12 million.
Over the 10-year period?
Yep.
When you say loss, what do you mean?
The fiscal impact of amendment 4 could be as much as $12 million in reduced revenues from fiscal year 2021 to 2030.
So foregone revenue. So instead of getting 205 million new dollars, we're going to get 193 million new dollars. Is that fair? Does that make sense?
Is that what you're saying, Councilman?
Yeah, I'm saying it's $12 million that we are not recouping for the benefit of schools construction, and the kids in them.
Okay, I was just focusing in on loss versus foregone revenue versus, because right now we haven't voted on anything. Right now everything's $1.32. So what we go up to from here is a plus in my mind. So when you use words like loss or negative, well, depends on how you look at it. I'm just talking about that.
I'm looking at the auditor's report, and it says reduced revenues.
I mean, I can tell you that even if you just take the market value of 2 school sites and you divide it through the square footages, it's worth $250. I mean, right there is just the value of that alone is, a substantial discount off of the 680. So, the numbers are correct. I don't think anybody disputes them. There's going to be amendments and things to this that we think are fair and important to do that are going to eat into that number. I don't.
Is there any further discussion? All right, let's call the. Oh. Dr. Jones.
I'm sorry.
All right, let's call the vote for Amendment 1 to Amendment 4.
Ms. Mercer Rigby?
No.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Young?
No.
Ms. Walsh?
Yes. We're doing Amendment 1.
Doing
Just
Amendment
doing
1 to
Amendment
Amendment
1.
4.
And Mr. Youngman?
No.
I'm going to take that vote. Dr. Jones.
All right.
Well, you guys remember my most famous one, so.
That is true.
That was a biggie.
That's
so
a hard one to
that's-
forget.
That is a hard one to forget.
Everybody gets a mulligan after that.
Amendment 1 to Amendment 4 does not pass. Now let's call for the vote to Amendment 4 as unamended, as originally drafted.
Ms. Mercer Rigby?
No.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Young?
No.
Ms. Walsh?
No.
Mr. Youngman?
Yes.
Amendment 4 does not pass.
We ready to move on? I move Amendment 5 to CB42.
Second.
And I move Amendment 1 to Amendment 5.
Second.
Okay, so what these do is, and folks, this is so important. And I know that I'm going to preach a little bit, but I'm the only person in the real estate industry up here. I'm the only financial person up here. You cannot shock markets the way we're about to do it. Not to say that the fee we eventually get to isn't important, which it is. We need to remain competitive. But even more important than that rate is not doing it all at once. So what this bill does is it phases it in over 3 years, but it adjusts the target rate at year 3 up to $7.50 to make it revenue neutral of what we are foregoing in the first 2 years. And so by the end of 10 years, we'll be back to that 205 million. Actually, the auditor says 208. So we may have picked up $3 million. And then from year 11 onward, we will have started at a baseline of 70 cents higher than we would now. But what it's enabling us to do is phase this in so that land prices have a chance to be absorbed, folks have a chance to renegotiate projects as they need to, rather than dropping the 430% increase on them day one. And if anybody cares what those numbers are, it would be 475 year 1, 625 year 2, and then 750 year 3 through 10 plus the CPI.
I feel like this one was going to generate a lot of discussion. So.
Well, I am curious if you've talked to the development community about paying $7.50 per square foot.
It was discussed because I know that they have the real live numbers and comply to real live projects. And the phase-in was so important that given the choice, they'd take the 750 phased in rather than 680 from day one. So,
Dr. Jones?
Yeah, was that, I'm now interested, given the conversations that may have happened with about 680, would you think that that conversation would be any different? Councilmember Young, I mean, I'm curious as when I'm looking at the numbers, when it says 750 per square foot thereafter, would that conversation have been any different? I guess I'm just focused on differences of conversations. Councilwoman Young.
Right. I'm not sure what the question is.
Oh, I'm sorry. You asked Councilmember Youngman if he had talked to anyone about 750. My question is, when you talk to someone about 680, how was that different with that conversation with what Councilman Youngman heard? Because I'm interested in the difference of conversations of 680 and 750.
Like, did they like the 680?
I'm sure that developers are not saying bring it on.
Right.
I mean, but it seems like it would be even less.
I heard they had a party.
Yeah, I think it would be even less likely that they would be saying that about $7.50. I mean, that if it's a 430% increase at 680, it's I don't know what, the 530% increase at 750, and I'm also thinking that it's one thing if you're getting the advantage, I guess, of the first 2 years of the phase-in. So if you're here and you already have projects and you're already in the building pipeline and you're being able to take advantage of that, that might be good. But if you're not, and then you come in for the first time with a project at $750 per square foot, that might seem even more shocking than $6.80.
Well, I think it's important to understand, and, it's funny reading on Facebook all the opinions.
So you shouldn't
You
just
know,
go there. Just don't go there.
how actually development works. So if I'm a developer, I'm controlling the middle. I'm buying land, I'm developing it, and then I'm selling those lots to somebody, or I'm building houses or apartments that then I'm going to put out in the market myself. I can control the back end, sort of the sale or rental or whatever, to an extent within the market. And I can control the front end of what I pay for the property. I mean, the long-term impact of this bill is it's going to severely devalue property in Howard County, raw land, because that's going to be the offset. If you're going to go buy a big piece of property for $5 million to go and build a project, and now your costs have gone up by X percent, you may only be able to pay $4 million for that property. But if that's a project that I'm going to build, 2 or 3 years from now, then I have the ability to control that front end a little bit. If I'm already kind of along and, I've already kind of struck a deal, I'm already under contract, maybe, whatever it might be, I'm not going to be able to absorb that big fee as much, so that's why the phase-in helps us sort of ease into it. But somebody that's got to pay $750 3 years from now, likely is going to be able to control their land costs on the front end. So that's the thinking.
Dr. Jones?
Yes. I remember having a brief conversation about it. You were saying that this nets out to zero or around zero.
Well, according to Mr. Glendenning, we picked up $3 million, but that was an unintended benefit.
Okay.
It was meant to just be revenue neutral.
Okay.
So when you said it devalues the raw land, can you express a little bit more about how it will affect the person in 2022?
The landowner? Mm-hmm. They're going to get less for their land. If you and I are developing let's say we're going to go build a bunch of townhouses. We know what it's going to cost us to build the townhouses. We know what we can sell them for. So the last variable is what we can afford to pay for the property. The market's going to control what we can sell it for. The combination of the market and our access to materials and efficiencies or whatever is going to guide our cost. Kind of the last plug is what we can afford to pay for the property. And that's what's so interesting, because you read social media, stick it to the developers and developers. This is not going to hurt developers that much. This is going to hurt landowners, people that have lived in Howard County a long time and own parcels of land. That's where all this stuff goes back to, and everybody loves to grab that low-hanging fruit of, we don't mind what we do to developers, but in the end, it's going to be your land values. It's going to be the value of collateral that banks are holding in raw land right now and the devaluation of that. All that's going to happen. What this amendment tries to do is phase that in so it's not a shock to the market, so it has a chance to kind of be absorbed over time. That's the sort of the goal of it.
But will it give a disproportionate shock to the end versus to the 2020 versus 2021?
I would love to get the phase in and stay at 680. But, it cost us $10-12 million, and I didn't want to lose that towards school construction. So I posed the question to stakeholders and said, given the choice, I think the phase-in's important, but I've got to pay for it. Can you manage that? And what I was told is yes. So,
So it's sort of this, so amendment 1 to 5 has it at 475 a square foot, up from 408, and 444, or 625 up from 544, and then 750 instead of the 680.
right. The amendment that we filed on Thursday was, we had rough numbers, but it was, sort of a placeholder. I mean, we knew we were going to need to amend to adjust the, call it the target rate. So. And I think if you have economists and folks in that, markets can adjust to just about anything. It just takes a little bit of time. And I feel like this is the bill that's going to help us not have as much doom and gloom from the budget office this year, that will still be belly aching over Apfo, and then they'll have impact fees on top of it. And next thing you know, we've got $25 million of revenue growth that we have to meet the needs of the whole county with. Whereas if it's phased in, most projects should be able to continue on. It shouldn't set back really any projects. So we're still going to collect our transfer tax revenue and whatnot. I mean, look, a project that's already tight, it could set it back. But this certainly enables us to get to the higher amount with a little bit less pain getting there.
Ms. Walsh, thoughts? Thought you were looking at me.
No.
Okay.
She was just happy that I paid for my amendment.
That's right. You didn't need an amendment to his amendment.
Nope.
I am curious when you went back to stakeholders to ask them if they would be okay with 750 versus 680. Who did you talk to? Did you talk to MBIA?
Yeah, MBIA mostly. Talked to a couple other home builders, developers, on the side. But yeah, I mean, it's not that we're allowing them to write the bill. Clearly, if they were writing the bill, it would be it would be at $1.50. But they have the financial models and they're in it. They were the best people to say, hey, which pill is easier or harder to swallow. Because while the phase-in was something I talked about 2 years ago with Apfo, and I've been talking about on this, I did hold open the possibility that I didn't know perfectly what was right. So I bounced it off of folks.
Well, here's my other concern, and that is Apfo has closed a lot of schools, and that will continue certainly for the next couple of years, I imagine. And so developers who wanted to take advantage of developing here in Howard County maybe won't be able to do so over the next 2 years because of closed schools. And then when they do get to the point where the schools are open again, it will be at the higher rate. It'll be at the 750 rate and not at the 680 rate.
Yeah, but I mean, not to go back to Dr. Jones's point, but I mean, we're dropping a 430% increase on this thing on the market. I'm not sure why we're getting heartburn over another 10% in 3 years. Like if the calculation that we did, the model with the video and all came out at $8, this thing would be $8. I think, right?
Yeah, I see it the opposite way, which is we have been undercharging that significantly for this long. And it's not dropping some surprise on them, but putting an end to the party, essentially. That there has to be fair share payment from this point going forward. And you're coming from a real estate background. I'm coming from the law firm aspect of it. This is not a surprise. This is stuff that's been in the works since the Apfo task force, since the spending affordability group every year says that we should be doing this. Everyone could see this coming from a mile away. It failed once before at the state delegation level. It finally got passed last year. Even that had all kinds of exemptions in it. This was visible from a mile away, and there had to have been some understanding on the industry side that the party was over, that this undercharging for this long has obviously had real consequences, real day-to-day impacts on our constituents, and this is the way that we resolve that.
And I agree with you 100%. I think people have known this was coming. We've gotten very little pushback on this. I think everybody kind of knew. But what number was being talked about in the winter? $4. And until this bill got filed at 680, nobody dreamed it was going to be this high. And even at this high, we haven't had as much uproar as I kind of expected that we might have. It's been more about how to do it by creating the least damage as opposed to the number itself, if that makes sense. I mean, most of the conversations we've had have been around grandfathering, phasing in, and senior housing and affordable housing and all those things versus, hey, the number's too high or hey, the number's wrong kind of thing. So, which is a good thing.
I'm glad you undertook the analysis, and I'm also glad that you made it sort of nets out so that it's not a loss.
I want the other $3 million. It's just it's best when you make big changes that affect markets and the economy that things get phased in. I'm not an economist. I don't know maybe the right words of why phasing things in is better, but it is. So
I think you made sense in your argument where you said it gives people time to adjust. And I think that's especially sort of dependent on where that line is drawn on number 6.
I think you're right.
Dr. Jones?
If this amendment passes, if Amendment 5 passes, it is gonna, so question, so all the previous amendments that refer to the rate, quote unquote, they will be referring to this phase-in if it passes, as we step along year 1, year 2?
Right.
That's how I see it.
Right.
Okay.
And ironically, by doing it this way, any sort of grandfathering or things you do on, like I forget on Amendment 3 what was calculated was what Amendment 3 cost. It's now going to cost less because it's going to be off of 475, not 680. So, I mean, that's not the purpose of Amendment 5, but it is a other benefit to it.
Just calculating my thirds. All right. Well, let's call the vote on 1 to 5.
Okay, Ms. Mercer-Rigby?
I like 1 to 5 a lot more than 5. And so I am a yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Young?
Yes.
Ms. Walsh?
I like Chair Rigby, like Amendment 1 to Amendment 5 better than I like Amendment 5. But I do not like Amendment 5 at all. I vote yes.
I'm sorry, you vote?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
It's
Mr.
a little
Youngman?
confusing. Okay.
Yes. Am I going to just have to keep offsetting your vote in case you do the wrong?
Okay.
Okay, so now let's vote on Amendment 5
As amended.
as
As
amended.
amended. Okay, Ms. Mercer-Rigby?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Young?
Yes.
Ms. Walsh?
No.
And Mr. Youngman?
Yes.
Amendment 5 as amended by Amendment 1 passes. Let's see. Mr. Youngman?
One more. I move Amendment 6 to CB42.
No, we have 2 more, but second.
And I move Amendment. Okay, I move Amendment 1 to Amendment 6.
Second.
And I move Amendment 2 to Amendment 6.
Second. And I'd like to, oh wait, where am I?
Don't I have one in there too?
He moved it and we seconded.
I moved it. I'm sorry.
Can you withdraw that motion?
Can I withdraw that motion,
Right?
Mr. Cook?
Or since we can discuss it, you can just.
Nope. I got to
Okay.
make a technical.
Yeah, so, provided the person who seconded it, which was the chair, agrees, you can withdraw your motion.
We will
Yes.
collectively withdraw our movement of your amendment.
Yes.
So
Which
this
is amendment
This is Amendment 2 to
1.
Amendment 6 has been withdrawn.
It's Amendment
by the-
1 to
It's
Amendment
Amendment
6.
1 to Amendment 6 is withdrawn. Amendment 2
1.
to Amendment 6 stands.
All right. I thank you both for your
But
courtesy.
you need to move it and then you need
Yes.
a second.
And do we have a,
No, before I move it, I am confirming a technical correction to the number that appears in your book. That is, instead of 730 being replaced, or replacing 680, the figure is $7.83. So amendment number 1 to amendment number 6 would simply change on page 6 in line 23, strike 680 and substitute 783. I move approval of amendment number 1 to amendment number 6.
Mr. Cook, can you amend an amendment or does she need, I think she needs to make a full new amendment. Like a new amendment to an amendment.
I understood that there was a mathematical error.
Okay.
Just a technical, that's how I
Nope.
understood the motion.
Yeah.
All good.
I mean, all of these were calculations done in response to amendments that came in late. And so I am eternally grateful for the auditor's office for turning over all 4 exercises. And this is the last of the 4 sponsored by D1. But that figure correctly calculated is 783.
Oh, second.
Okay, so now Amendment 6 with both amendments in,
And I'd like to, well, why don't you go for Amendment 6 and then I'll make my amendment to your Amendment 6.
okay. It is a somewhat normal practice when subdivision laws, when any law, fee, that type of stuff is changed, that you grandfather things. But of course, the big debate is always at what point do you grandfather? And the folks that have to abide by the bigger law or pay the bigger fee want it to be grandfathered at the beginning, and we want it to be grandfathered at the end. As filed, Amendment 6 pulled language from the subdivision regulations, which is where we grandfather projects for changes in the subdivision regulations. after discussion over the weekend, between me and my colleagues, it was desired that this grandfathering be towards the end of the process instead of the beginning. Thus, my Amendment 2 to Amendment 6 grandfathers projects that are one step away from having their final site development plan signed, and that one step away is that the final site development plan has been accepted by Department of Planning and Zoning. The small difference between sort of the finish line and what I'm proposing is simply the 20 signatures that you need to get on that SDP. I just could envision that between tonight and the first week of January, with DPZ, at least a person down, 2 holidays, everybody screaming, "You've accepted my SDP, I need my signatures." And if one project got done and another project didn't, and the cost was $2 million, that would be that puts DPZ in a tough position. So I talked to DPZ about it, and this is what they suggested as was a half a step away from being, the final signed subdivision plan. And if you look at it, it's called something different whether you're inside the planned service area or outside the planned service area. And for a minor subdivision, the way we do it is a final approval letter, because they don't need to always do a site development plan. So as amended by Amendment 2, Amendment 6 grandfathers projects that have basically gotten final approval. And they just pay the $1.32 versus the $4.75 that we just approved. And one more point on the grandfathering. The grandfathering expires after 2 years. I think we've learned that when we grandfather things and they sit around for 20 years and never get built, and then all of a sudden they come out of nowhere. So, if you were grandfathered, if you have an approved project and you get grandfathered and you don't build within 2 years, then your grandfather goes away.
Sounds like it just leaves.
That's all I got.
So I liked your lines 13, or line 12, or sorry, 14. I liked the 2-year portion. And so
District 5 has one that waited around for decades.
Yes.
And they just started
I think we
coming out of the woodwork.
all know that one with elementary school, 41, 42, 43, 44.
44.
For now. Could be 45. So I looked at the impact that it would be to have a signed site development plan, which is that line right before you get your building permits. And so I'd like to introduce Amendment 3 to Amendment 6, which basically says page 1, line 6, strike, and then before you get to, on page 1 in line 6, and strike, and then include the 2-year, because I think many of us has learned from that and wanted to keep it, and substitute a signed site development plan. And I've passed the fiscal impact out to my colleagues as well.
So you're kind of going to, it's that difference between where I said that it was, accepted by DPZ, and just make clear, accepted means they have deemed that it reflects all the changes that have been requested through the process and meets all the requirements. It's just lacking that signature, and you're moving it up to
that signature.
It's got to have that signature. So what do you do?
Where do yours fall in terms of accepted and approved? Does this, in terms of like the status and where they fall?
So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, if I could just.
Oh, I
has-
didn't get a
has the,
second.
Motion needs to be seconded.
Yes.
Before it can be debated.
I'm so sorry. You're so right.
And make sure that everybody knows what in fact is being amended.
Sure.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. So on page 1, in line 6, strike beginning with the colon down through and including line 13 and substitute assigned site development plan.
It's not the amendment, it's to the amendment number 6, not to
It's
the
amendment,
to amendment.
it would be the third amendment to amendment 6.
So this would be Amendment 3 to Amendment 6.
Yes.
Got it.
Thank you for the second.
And is that, so that amends line 7 of Amendment 6?
Beginning in line 6. Yep, takes 7 through 13 and just inputs in assigned site development plan.
Well, what about projects that don't do a site development plan?
Happy to add to amendment 3. So is it assigned final plat for the original?
It's called it, for the non-planned service area, it's apparently, according to the acting director, a technically complete final plan.
At record plat phase 1 for a phased project or a final plan. See, my concern with 4 through 6 was that these are sort of the technically complete letters versus
Yeah, no.
the
it's-
actual last stop.
No, and it's interesting because remember we were talking about technically complete and we said, oh, it's a lot early in the process and it is at the end of the process.
Right.
It's all over the process. You're technically complete
Right, at
each
each
different
stage.
step. So the word technically complete doesn't actually, we've learned, mean much. So it's technically complete final plan, which is the same as for outside the planned service area, their version of a site development plan. I don't know why one's called a final plan, one's called a site development plan. And the only reason that at record plat of phase 1 for a phase project exists is in the West because there's so few allocations each year. Let's say somebody's going to do a project that's going to have, 80 houses. DPZ will ask them to do 30, 30, and 20. So they don't eat up basically all the allocations in one project. So, so if a project is trying to accommodate DPZ, knowing that it's better for them to build it in phases anyway, all they're saying is, if I've gotten my record plat for the first phase, you've approved the whole project. I'm just going to pull my allocations year 2 and year 3, but I'm not going to have to go. If I'm going to slow my project down for allocations, I shouldn't be stuck paying the higher fee because I didn't go in for all 80 at the same time. Does that make sense?
I have a number of questions here. I don't understand how much this would cost. I don't know how many units.
$14 million.
14 million.
Where does it say that?
We got our fiscal impact. The last email, guys, that we got from Michelle at 717, if you scroll down to the attachments, the last attachment is an Excel spreadsheet. Amend X to amend 6. That is the fiscal analysis.
What time?
It was at 717, but you can look at mine if you want.
Thank you very much, Miss Michelle.
Yeah, and while everybody's looking for this, while we're
there
doing this, every single time we change something, one of our legislative people has to rewrite it. It has to go to the Office of Law. It has to go to the auditor. And so these folks have been burning up the keyboards all day. So thank you.
Mr. Glendenning?
Yeah, only the sponsor has this, and we're
Yes.
forwarding it to everybody.
I was going to
right
say,
now.
I have different.
I apologize, everybody.
No, it's fine. As we were cramming
haven't
up on
seen
amendments
that.
to amendments, we were bashing them out to the sponsors.
Well, it's
We
$14
have not
million.
seen that.
Can
You
you?
will have it momentarily.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to send it over. To everybody. I just sent it.
Thank you.
And it's when you open it, you'll see a bunch of Word documents, which are just like the amendment itself. It's the spreadsheet at the end. And we can go through it in detail if you want, or you can just go to the fairly large number at the bottom with the parentheses.
It's a big number.
Now, interestingly,
Can I ask you, before you move on to that, can I ask you another question? You mentioned a final approval letter for a minor subdivision. So could you explain that just a little bit more? That's for, a minor subdivision is for 4 homes or less.
4 lots, yeah.
And the final plan approval letter is what they receive rather than what was the other?
Instead of having their
Instead of
site
having a
development plan signed, they sign
Site development plan.
an approval letter, or in the case of the RR and RC, it's called a final plan.
Are these minor subdivisions included in that 14 million?
Yeah, that's the total cost of the whole grandfathering.
The whole grandfathering?
Yeah.
Do you
Now, I
know
actually,
specifically what that piece, is there a way for you to pull that piece out and understand what the cost would be to grandfather them?
they could rerun this, but in all honesty, I mean, I could have come in and said, look, if all you're doing is building one house. I mean, I have clients that build 1 or 2 custom homes a year, but they're stuck paying this. They generate kids too. I'd love to exempt them, but, you know, it's, if I could, change the subject for 1 second, when I said it was 14 million bucks, that was actually before we passed the phasing. So figuring that the grandfathered projects would be paying the lower fee because they're like ready to go, then it's actually, if they were paying 475, it'd be 10.2 million, and then 650 would be, you know, probably 13.5 million.
Oh, so that's each year,
No, one time.
one time?
One time over the, so it basically reduces that $208 million by somewhere between 10 and 13 million dollars. I would love to debate that try to say it's a small number, but it's, you know, it's not. It's just, but in fairness, people have gone through 3 years of process. They probably have upwards of $1 million invested in engineering, legal fees. A lot of them gone through planning board and zoning board and every other DAP. And they are like, DPZ has already checked the box and said, you have submitted to us what we think is your final plan. It just needs to go around to 24 county agencies and get a signature. And we're going to increase the cost of their project by $3 million. And I just think it's wrong.
I've heard you make that argument several times tonight, and I have the same response, which is it's the cost of doing business. It's something people have seen coming for a long time. It's an assumption of risk, basically, that builders in this county versus other county that have different rights vesting at different times. Under that current Apfo law, the way that these particular fees are assessed is at the time of building permit. And you don't have vested rights like we are apparently proposing to add in, as we do have for land use regulations, into the Apfo.
I don't know that I think people should have vested rights. I just think that when you're looking at a significant change in cost, I mean, for that second residential building in downtown Columbia, you know, the one that's going to go next to Bus Boys and Poets, we increased the cost of that project by $3.5 million tonight. that's not chump change. And that wouldn't be grandfathered under this because it's not to this stage. But that's the magnitude of dollars you're talking about.
That leads me to my other question, which is, I think if I'm reading this right, we've identified 1,127 projects that would be grandfathered out under this amendment. Mr. Glendenning, am I reading your chart right? Or should I be asking Ms. Hurd?
That units.
Units. 1,127 units would be grandfathered out under this proposed amendment. And
Yeah, that's correct.
780 of those, I understand, are all in a singular project, which is the Laurel TOD development. This is the project that came up during the work session.
I thought that was 2 something.
It's 780. 780 of 1127 are all the same project.
Yeah,
Is that
that's
the
correct.
difference between approved and signed on mine? Yeah.
And I
Oh,
do
that's
agree, and this
interesting.
came up at the work session as well, is you can't just revert to signed site development plan, because depending on the project, the requirements are different in terms of what is indicative or recognized by code in terms of what the final steps are. And so
If you don't want to grandfather anyone, then why is it an issue?
it's not, but I need at least some number of you to agree with me. And it needs to be, and this is the same point I made in the work session, I may not agree with it, but it should be clear. If you're going to draw a line, it should be defensible and unambiguous. And I don't know that you have that now. I don't know that you have, I mean, I see this chart for Amendment 2 to Amendment 6, but there are other amendments to this Amendment 6, and I'm not sure that we have the same analysis in terms of what are the projects exempted by this proposed amendment and at what cost. And then again, if we have opinion maybe from the Office of Law that we've clearly delineated where that grandfathering line is. I didn't hear it at work session, and I don't hear it now, but for maybe the language that exactly mirrors what's in the land use regulations. And again,
Right.
by code, that provision isn't there for a reason. This particular surcharge is and has historically been assessed at the time of building permit.
But
You- I think
you
you
do
have-
have the list of, it's the same, the 200 here are the same 200 there.
Yeah, I don't think we linked what I emailed around and what you had.
Right, I'm just saying that signed 200 units is the same signed 200 units in your spreadsheet.
So like your fiscal impact
It's not.
is actually no longer 10 million.
No,
It's
it is.
probably less.
Just for the first year.
Right. So the delta between my amendment and the chair's amendment is going to be somewhere in that $3 to $4 million range. Or no, because it's all the one project. No, it's not, because you have the analysis
That project
right
is
there.
exempted here, where this
Right.
Amendment 3 would be
Right.
$10 million in reduced
No,
revenue?
you're reading this incorrectly. So this is
I'm
what's,
reading it for the first time.
well, then let me explain it to you. So this is what you have it approved. The amendment as written, which you have in front of you, says signed site development plan. So you would look at the ones that are signed, which is 200, which is 3.7. If you did approved and signed, that would get you to this, but this is just for the 3.7 signed. That's what the amendment is written, and that's what they go to. And then if you want additional detail, they're also available in Mr. Youngman's spreadsheets.
The 200.
Yes,
Where are they?
it's right here. And you can see where they are.
120 in Elk Ridge,
120,
80 in Southeast. So whereas your Amendment 3 is proposing to exempt 200 signed units at a reduced revenue of almost $4 million?
well, 3.7, but I assume it would be less after the phase-in. Or not?
Well, I have.
Take it how you want. But
Well, I actually have, on the thing I emailed around, they have signed as 3.8 million. So if you assume that that's at 680, and at least some of those will be at the phased-in amount, it's somewhere less than 3.8 million. So still the sort of difference between signed and, they've been accepted is, upwards of $8 million.
Just
But-
so I'm understanding this argument, you guys are saying that because you agreed to a phase-in where we're charging less at the earlier years of this term, that you're actually not costing, you're not.
I'm fine with saying it's 3.7 million. My point is that while you get signed right before you get your building permit, and I'm okay with providing that measure of stability for projects that, you know,
Two projects.
today, I'm trying to pick a line. You're going in and picking projects and targeting people. I'm trying to pick a line in the process. And I'm trying to do that irrespective of what they build, who they build. I'd much prefer to do that blind, because I think then you really start to color and target people. And I'm trying to simply pick a line in the process. So that's why I went with sign development. It's the last step. It's 3.7 million. It's a fair investment in sort of that stability from my perspective. Doesn't have to be everyone's perspective, but that's why. And you don't have to agree, and that's cool.
And I really don't think, though, that the missing piece of the fiscal analysis is of the first column, which is the 8.7 million. How many of those are going to get signed? I mean, if they're accepted, then they already have, they're already in a form that has all the recommendations of every different phase of the approval process, and they meet the requirements. So if that one project of 790 units hustles their thing around in the next 60 days and they get signed, well, then the difference between approved and signed is de minimis.
And if they don't, they don't.
And we're putting DPZ in a tough spot if they can't get it done.
I mean,
that's who I was working with all day today, was DPZ, of, how is this going to work? And so.
I mean, I see 14 million and I see a Talbot Springs. I see 14 million and I see financing a Hammond High.
Well, it's not 14 million anymore, it's 10.
Okay, well.
And
I still see financing either one of those.
No, I'm with you. I actually, one of the things I like about the phase-in is you could take that 475. Remember, we were talking about bonding versus not bonding. You could say, okay, maybe that's the amount that you bond, and then the extra $3 that you're going to grow into is the amount you don't bond, and that's going to be the pay-go. It might just help to, develop that balance. We talk about the numbers to death, but in all honesty, when you have one project that's going to be on one column or the other column, then it's kind of hard to know that this is the way the numbers are going to come out based on whether they get in under the wire or not. So,
I mean, when I first picked the line, again, I didn't look at who it is, because I'm trying to pick a line, and I think, to me, 3.7 is a lot more palatable. You don't know if they're going to be signed or not. 780 is a lot of units to get through 20 people.
And not being a District 3 person, I didn't have any clue that they were that far along. So,
well, to be honest, even I.
So I didn't even.
I was not aware
honestly
that they
look
were
at the top.
that
I looked
stage.
at the math at the bottom because I was just looking at the total unit count. I wasn't paying attention to where they were, who they were, anything like that.
But my concern is that if you move it farther back, to do that much for one project, I'm not comfortable with that. If you put it at signed, I'm more comfortable with that.
I don't have anything to add.
Ms. Young, Dr. Jones? So is there a way to add the outside the PSA for the units that don't have the signed SDP in a way that is acceptable to people?
What if we took your language, Amendment 3 to Amendment 6, and substituted that as line 2 and 3 on Amendment 2 of Amendment 6?
Well, we can't amend an amendment,
I know.
so we'd have to Franken amend them.
So can we merge them together and make Amendment 4? I like that.
Do we,
Mr. Cook? Is that
Do you-
how this usually gets done?
but do you have
Wouldn't we have to withdraw or finish the motion, or we'd have to do something because?
or
we
we'd have to
three-
make Amendment 4?
We would have to.
I think the cleanest thing at this juncture would be for you to decide what you want the language to be and then put it in a new amendment
Yeah.
to this amendment, and then you can simply not, well, you should probably withdraw those previously
Withdraw
moved
two
and seconded amendments that you don't want to move anymore.
Okay. So what's the fiscal impact for the outside of the planned service area 4 through 6? Sorry.
Well, that includes everything. So if you go up there to the rural west, you got 5 units approved, 52 technically complete. So there's not that many units.
So it's 57 units of the west.
Yeah, I mean, it's always possible that those
We can
That
generally
those-
assume those are single-family detached homes.
yeah, and I mean, there's other 10 in the southeast. There's always a chance that they're out of the planned service area. Ellicott City's got a little bit out of the planned service area, but that's only 17 units. I mean, out of the 1,100 units, we're looking at 33. So, I mean, we could extract.
So it'd be
them out, but-
233 units, essentially.
No, I mean, we know it's 57, and then.
Oh, right. Sorry.
It would either be 57 and then potentially the 17 in Ellicott City or the 10 in the southeast. I mean, odds are that they're in the planned service area, but they always could be out. So they're, if they're not, it's nominal compared to the whole thing, and I don't know that any of these are.
So it all
Well,
sort
the
of
two
depends on
Elk
the
Ridge,
square
the
footage.
two approved in Elk Ridge is probably a minor sub, obviously. The 5 in the rural west could be a combination of 2 minor subs. It could be a 2 and a 3 or a 1 and a 4. So they'd be covered under that subsection 3.
All right.
But it seems like the cleanest thing, if we're kind of all to the point of we don't want accepted and we want signed, would be to take your language, if you're looking at Amendment 2, would be to take your language for lines 2 and 3 and then leave in 4, 5, and 6.
But why and what impact? Where are you guys go? I'm not sure what you're aiming towards now.
We're aiming towards the line, where you draw the line.
And so that's what I'm asking is what is the rationale between
So put 1
this
and 2.
new line different than the 3 that are in our binders now?
Well, your concern was that signed SDP didn't include planned service area, outside the planned service area for projects that didn't have that. So then Mr. Youngman's language of outside the planned service area would garner the 57 and potentially some of the 10 of the southeast, and then it would be the 200 units between 2 and of the signed SDP.
If I take the 3.793 million from the spreadsheet for signed, divide that by the 680, multiply it by the 475, I'm at 2.6. If some flowed into the following year, it's going to be around $3 million.
Okay.
Is the cost of the combination of yours plus mine.
Foregone revenue.
Yeah.
All right, do you want to move Franken 4?
Franken 4. No, you should probably do it because you have the language
Okay.
of what you are inserting in.
All right, so I'd like to withdraw Amendment 3. And then I'd
Withdrawing
Amendment 3
3.
to Amendment 6. And then I think we'd like to move on page 1 in line 6, beginning with the colon, down through, beginning with the colon, strike that. Substitute assigned development plan. And then lines 4 through 6 from Amendment 2. So they read outside of the planned service area, a technically complete final plan at record plat of phase 1 for a phased project, or a final plan approval letter for a minor subdivision. And then
Then you're keeping lines 10
wait,
through
we
the
need
rest?
to, yeah, essentially we need to strike through lines 7 to 13. Strike lines 7 to 13, insert assigned development plan, the following link, and then the lines 4 through 6, and then retain lines 14 and 15 and 16, 17 from the original amendment.
Okay.
Ms. Schwartz-Jones, are you able to assist in this
Would you like me
drafting?
to read it back to you, what
That
I
would
think
be-
I'm hearing?
Very helpful.
So, what I think I'm hearing is that Amendment 4 to Amendment 6, as you are contemplating moving it, would be that, number 1, on page 1 in line 6, strike beginning with a colon down through and including line 13. And in line 2, substitute, quote, a signed site development plan, end quote. Then you would have a new line 3 on Amendment 4 that would read it would read on page 1, strike lines 7 through 9 and substitute 2 outside of the planned service area, a technically complete final plan at record plat of phase 1 for a phased project, semicolon, or 3, a final plan approval letter for a minor subdivision, semicolon, or. Am I hearing that correctly? That's what you were trying to do? And I'm,
She said,
Well,
Ms. Schwartz-Jones said lines 7 through 9, and I believe you said lines 7 through 13.
13.
Yeah.
Does the,
Okay.
yeah, we
Right.
want to go 7
that's
to
right.
13.
I'm sorry, line
Okay.
7 through 13.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jones.
That's okay. Just trying to put everything together.
And then it would retain the 2-year fleeing grandfather language.
Yeah.
So if I understand then, on line 2 would be substitute, like a number 1, a signed site development plan, semicolon, then number 2, outside of the planned service area, and basically as it reads on lines 4 through 6 of proposed amendment 2.
Yes, except striking or at the bottom of at the end of line 6. Because then it goes into B, the rates.
So,
Mr. Cook?
Madam Chair, if I could recommend, since you have somebody from staff here who could write this up, that's the better way to legislate.
Yes.
So have that drafted up, and then we can all take a look at it, make sure everybody's on the same page, and then clean up those things which need to be withdrawn. And then hopefully you've got 4 votes to get this introduced. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's an amendment
Whoa,
to an
this is an
amendment.
amendment to an amendment.
Sorry, my
Okay.
mistake, yeah,
3.
I take that back.
So let's take a 5-minute recess. As we're all a 10-minute recess.
7th inning stretch.
A 10-minute recess for a 7-minute stretch to allow staff to type it up, and then we can all review and move forward. So we'll be back at 10:28. All right, let's reconvene. Many thanks to Mr. Jeff Myers for drafting this on the fly, and to Mr. Cook for the suggestion. So as we have it before us, it reads, it's only being done by me, but it's okay. On page 1, strike lines 7 through 13 and substitute 1 within the planned service area, assigned site development plan, or 2 outside the planned service area, technically complete final plan at record plat of phase 1 for a phased project, or 3 a final plan approval letter for a minor subdivision. The rates provided for in this section 2 shall only apply to the construction for which surcharge is collected on or before the day that is 2 years after the effective date of this act. All right. All right. Let's call the vote. Oh,
We
wait.
need to introduce.
Mm-hmm.
Just want to amendment 4 to amendment 6. Let's make sure this works.
1 is me.
1 is Ms. Walsh. 2 is Mr. Youngman. 3 was me, but I withdrew.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Are you withdrawing number 2?
Can we vote this before
Is-
that?
Well, you've got, yeah, you could vote it down. As long as the
Oh.
Second Amendment is disposed of before you vote on the bill finally, because it's been moved and seconded.
I'll go ahead. I'll withdraw 2.
All right.
Because if 4 is
So-
not going to pass, 2 is not going to pass. So keep it clean. 2 and 3 are withdrawn.
And, yeah, and who's the second on Amendment 4?
I believe I did.
Thank you for approving our withdrawal.
I apologize. You moved?
Mr. Youngman withdrew. Dr. Jones was the second. He allowed us to withdraw 2 and 3.
Okay, so now we have a motion for amendment number 4, which was,
Well, do we need to consider 1 before 4?
Well, I think we need to introduce. We need to.
Oh, we need to introduce 4.
right.
All right.
I'll go ahead and
That's
move
correct.
move Amendment 4 to Amendment 6 to CB42.
Second, in the vein of Ms. Walsh, do you want to join on this amendment? As drafted, I'm by myself.
Okay.
But if this is a combination of our efforts, then.
Just to make sure everyone has seen what Michelle just forwarded to you
Oh.
with the fiscal impact on this.
No.
All right, just want to make sure you see it before you vote on it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glendale.
And thank you, Michelle.
She's amazing.
You are amazing.
So the impact is going to be about 8.4 million altogether from the impact from this actual amendment.
And that's at 680. But if it's the 4 something, it'd be. So that's the difference between 680 and 132.
Good point. Right, that would be a little less than
It'd
that.
be
How much less?
couple mil.
It depends on whether it comes in year 1 or year 2.
Sorry.
But if you did it at like 525,
Yeah. For year 1. I mean, yeah, year 1. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, time it's like it, like a kind of a hybrid. It's going to be like 6.7 million. That's what it sounds like.
Are minor subdivisions on here?
Well, that was the problem, is we can't distinguish them, because this was something that came up late, so we didn't get an answer to be able to distinguish the two.
Well, we know that minor subs are on here because the Elk Ridge approved numbers 2. So that's either 1 of 2 or 2 single lots. And then the rural west of 5 could be 2 minor subs, or it could be
Right,
a
so
full sub of 5.
we know they're on there, we just don't know which is
Right.
minor, which one's major.
Okay, so I understand they're in here, we just don't know exactly where they are.
Right.
But they comprise part of the 8 million or so, assuming 680.
There's 57 units in the 10.
I mean, even those 17 in Ellicott City could have a couple minors in there.
Except for the minor sub, it's a portion of the 17 and a portion of the 52. Or it's all of the 52 and a portion of the 17 and a portion of the 10.
I think the point is that they're in the number. Like, we're not just looking at basically one within the planned service area assigned site development plan, and then there's other things we're grandfathering that aren't in that number. Everything's in that number. We just can't pull it out separately.
So with the phase-in, it's closer to 7?
I get 6.8. What I did is I multiplied it. I assumed the average fee that we were foregoing was $525. So and in all honesty, because that one big project in there, it's really going to depend on them. So we've got Amendment 4 to Amendment 6. Ready to vote?
I don't know. I'm sorry.
You
Ms.
have
Schwartz?
Amendment 1 to 6, and you have Amendment 4 to 6.
Before we leave the spreadsheet, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm reading it. So the $8 million that the auditor's office is referring to us is the bottom of that first column, column B, the 8.787? I'm in the wrong column. So. So 8.436 is the calculated lost revenue at the 680 rate.
Yeah, if it's the full 680 rate.
G41 minus 240.
David, can you walk me through your methodology one more time?
Through mine?
Mm-hmm.
Of
Of the phase.
Oh, through the phase?
Well, what this would be with the phase.
You know, if you do it all at 475, then it's 6.1 million. If you do it at 650, it's 8.4 million. So it's really going to depend, because you have so much of it in one project, you almost can't really average it. It's all going to come down to whether or not they get signed. And I think you got to assume they get signed. I mean, with so much money at stake, I would think that they're going to be it's just an assumption. I probably shouldn't assume. But if you're trying to be most conservative, I would multiply it at the 650. I'd assume you're foregoing it at the year 2 rate, not the year 1 rate.
I have to say that the thing that most concerns me about this whole project here is the fact that it is one big developer who looks like they're going to primarily benefit from doing this. If there was more of a spread on this spreadsheet, I would feel better about it. I would say, okay, look, there's, a lot of smaller projects that have been in the pipeline that look like they're, close to getting signed or approved or whatever. But we're looking at a project that has 780 units, and
But that's like saying we want to help somebody because they're small and we don't really care about the one that's big. I mean, we can't pick winners and losers, can we?
well, that's kind of what we end up doing with this particular. By doing it in this particular way, we're picking a winner, and some people have, I suppose they might. I'm sure they would consider that they lost tonight. So, this.
But
does
we're not
seem
specifically
like-
picking winners and losers based on our impression of whether we care about hurting them more than care about hurting someone else, kind of thing. Like we feel bad for the person that's only building 2 lots. And look, I'm with you. You feel bad for that person that's only building 2 lots. You might not feel as bad for the one that's building 700 units. But I know we're picking winners and losers based on where we put the line, but at least we're not looking at it project specific and saying kind of who we want to protect and who we don't. I just think that's kind of a dangerous place.
But we did. 780 is the Laurel TOD project. We all know that because of the questions that were asked in the work session and the follow-up.
Well, now we know that.
But,
Yeah.
I mean,
In all
that is what it
yeah.
is. It's not an
Right.
unknown. You're not blind to it. It was a direct result of an analysis that had to capture where are these projects in the timeline with DBZ and where does the cutoff look like and who's on one side or the other of a line. And that is the effect of where you've drawn this line now, is that a significant beneficiary, unlike many others, is a singular project.
Could potentially get through.
And I'm not.
Though, is it
arguing-
ethical to target like that?
Well, and I'm not arguing that in your head, in your analysis, you might not consider that. I'm just saying that I don't think we should set the policy based on how we feel about who's going to benefit and who not.
Right.
If you're willing to
You try to remove yourself.
if you're willing to not grandfather them, you have to be willing to not grandfather the person that's got 2 lots, I think. And I know that stinks, but it doesn't stink. I think it's the fair
Well,
way.
I think
it's
it
the
is
fair
what
way
it
to do
is. You have to, a line has to be drawn. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, but at least one of us thinks that the line should be drawn where the line is drawn in the code now, which is that building permit. That's a line, and everyone's on the other side of it. Then you're not picking favorites. Then you're not conveying some benefit to one group of projects versus another. It's the same line that existed yesterday is the same line that'll exist 60 days from now.
Oh, by that logic, you could go for Mr. Youngman's. You draw the line where the subdivision code is.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd like to be somewhere in between those lines and closer to one line.
that
the
line.
other line.
That line of building permit is not a huge line because the only movement in the fee is by CPI every year. So if the county didn't get my plan signed because so and so was on vacation, just cost me 0.8 cents per square foot, not $3 or $4 a square foot. I mean, some of these projects have taken 2 or 3 years to get done. They've been through the DAP, they've been through planning board, they've been through a handful of revisions. They got $1 million in legal fees and engineering fees, and all they're doing is waiting for a signature on something that's complete, and they've already submitted to the county. And we're going to tell them, too bad. Hand us another $6 million. I just have a hard time with that.
All right, well,
I've never had so much silence after I talk. Usually people are lined up to yell at me.
Well, it's a hard decision.
It is.
And
I get
you
it.
know, it's your arguments are compelling. Being so far along through the process, but the other side of this argument, which we've lost sight of a little bit, is the fact that the whole purpose behind this bill is to raise construction money fees for our schools that are desperately in need of being built here in Howard County because, once again, I will say it, we are the fastest growing county in terms of school population in the entire state of Maryland. And at some point, we have to look to the entities that are benefiting from this, and that is the people who are building the homes. And I realize that it's not just people who are building homes. I know that kids also come from resales, but we do know that a certain percentage of these kids come from new construction, and that we have our fees have been unusually low for a very long time, 15 years to be exact, since the fee was actually changed. And I just think we have this opportunity now, and we need to take it. So that's where I am.
right. And then there's the aspect of what it takes to get this passed, and what would be lost if we didn't. So,
I mean, look, like I said before, this has been sloppy. I know, but we've turned this into a decent policy tonight, and we're raising a lot of money, and that's a good thing. But you know, you've got to be willing to sit back and say, I know we want more, but there's got to be some level of
reason.
of fairness to, I mean, if you were building one house for yourself and you were right up there waiting for a signature, the only thing you hadn't done was got a signature and pulled your building permit, and if you're building a house like most of us live in, it's going to be $25,000, $30,000. And the county just said, hey, sorry, it's going to cost you another 30 grand.
You know what,
It's
that's
just
a
hard.
compelling story, but do we have an amendment that addresses that person versus a 780-unit apartment building in Laurel?
So it's okay to be fair to a person building one lot, but it's not okay to be fair to somebody that's building more?
Well,
I'm not sure it's fair to target anybody. That's my issue.
Yeah, no.
But I don't know that are we addressing that circumstance that you're saying is the fairness argument?
Sure. I mean, if it's anything smaller than, I mean, if they have their final approval letter as a minor sub, they're going to be at
As a
132.
single house.
So
And
one
they build
lot.
and they do it within the next 2 years.
Yeah.
I don't see that.
Madam Chair, I support you calling for a vote.
All right. Well, then let's call the vote. First, we have Amendment 1 to Amendment 4, or to Amendment 6.
Yeah.
Okay, Amendment 1 to Amendment 6, Ms. Mercer Rigby,
No.
Dr. Jones,
No.
Ms. Young,
No.
Ms. Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Youngman.
No.
All right. Amendment 1 to Amendment 6 does not pass. 2 was withdrawn. 3 was withdrawn. Now we have Amendment 4 to Amendment 6.
Okay. Ms. Mercer Rigby,
I'd rather we pass this and we get it and we have it over the next 10 years, and we're able to do the things like Talbot and Hammond that we want to do, and that are needed and are important. And with everything, I try to approach it with thoughtfulness and reason and consideration. And so I am yes on 4 to 6.
Okay. Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Young?
Well, I also think it's important to approach this with thoughtfulness and reasonableness, and I have been working with Councilmember Rigby for the last 3 months, and it
God,
has,
longer than
no, I mean, just on this bill, yeah. And we've had an excellent partnership and really have gone lockstep, I think, on everything that we've done, and our approach on this. We truly have been partners and have worked together very well in bringing this bill before the county and to our council members tonight. So I regretfully vote no, because we have agreed on so much, and I think that this is the one place where I deviate a little bit from where Councilmember Rigby has, where she has just voted. But I know that on so much more, and the things that really will count going into the future, we do agree, and that we will put forth a bill that will really be helpful to this county and to school construction.
Okay. Ms. Walsh?
No.
And Mr. Youngman?
Yes.
So Amendment
Amendment 8.
4 to Amendment 6 passes. We need to vote on Amendment 6 as amended by Amendment 4. Wait, correct? Or did we just do that?
The vote
I thought
on
we just
Amendment
did
6 as amended by Amendment 4, yes. So, Ms. Mercer Rigby.
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Young?
No.
I'm sorry?
No.
Okay. Ms. Walsh?
No.
And Mr. Youngman?
Yes.
We did 7. Mr. Cook's amendment. I move Amendment 8 to Council Bill 42.
Second.
Whoop. Oh. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, as always, Mr. Meyer. So this will require 4 votes to allow for introduction.
I move Amendment 8
Second.
to
Oh, wait, we
CB42.
need to call the vote for to get introduced.
Yes. So, this is a vote to allow the introduction of Amendment 8.
Yes.
Ms. Mercer Rigby?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Young?
Yes.
Ms. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Youngman?
Yes.
This is a first for us. Mr. Cook, would you like to introduce the amendment?
Yeah, just so it's clear for the record, Section 2142 of the county code was actually put there by Chapter 744 of the Acts of the General Assembly, and it's been in effect since July 1st of this year. When the bill came in, it essentially took the portions from the state law that were new and added it as an amendment to existing Section 2142. I do think it's going to confuse the code publisher who's already put it in the code. They're going to get this bill that is adding Section 2142 again. The amendments that you all have voted on tonight with regard to 2143, which actually imposes the tax according to the rates that you've talked about and voted on, that's what's really the gut of the bill, which will stay in the bill and is not affected by taking out the lines that Mr. Myers has indicated, which is basically all of Section 20.142, which is the state authorization. It's in there now.
All right.
If you would also need to move it and second it in.
All right. Then we will move it.
Second.
Okay.
All right. And let's vote on Amendment 8 to Council Bill 42.
Ms. Mercer-Rigby?
Oh, and now we need to move to approve it. I thought I moved it and she seconded it.
Yeah, you just did that.
Okay. There we go. All right. So I am a yes on Amendment 8.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Young?
Yes.
Ms. Welsh?
Yes.
And Mr. Youngman?
Yes.
All right. Amendment 8 to Council Bill 42 passes. Now it's all rolled up. Ms. Schwartz-Jones, please call the vote for Council Bill 42 as amended by Amendments 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Okay, Ms. Mercer-Rigby?
It's not easy to get legislation over the finish line. That's something I've certainly learned in the last year. We've been working on this bill for 5 months.
5 months? Has it been 5 months? Okay.
It's
See,
almost
she's so
half a
good at the
year.
math. Thank you.
Not as good as Dr. Jones. Never happen. And in getting legislation passed, it does require conversations and compromise and collaboration. And so I'm glad that we've been able, and we will be contributing to our school fund. This is not just a fight that's been taken over the last 5 months. This is really one that I would like to credit many of the advocates who have worked so hard to make sure we have state enabling legislation to allow us to even get to this point. And I look forward to the future. So, yes.
Okay, Dr. Jones?
Yes, really fast, I just want to say that the final numbers, however they may be for wherever it is, whatever it is may be in that particular part of the code, is a plus from $1.32 unless it's senior housing or something of the sort. So I would appreciate if anyone watching at home, listening later, or ready to fire up their social media outlet, that they look at the positive, look at this optimistically from $1.32 into the positive. I vote yes.
Okay, Ms. Young?
Well, this is a monumental piece of legislation, and I know, as Councilmember Rigby has pointed out, that there have been a lot of people who have been involved in this for a very long time. I want to, in particular, thank our staffs for what they have done, because behind the scenes, particularly the staff of Councilmember Rigby and my staff, have spent many, 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 many hours looking at mathematical formulas and researching and everything else it takes to make sure that we've got the numbers right. And of course, that includes our very able auditor and the audit office, who really have done a thank you. Yes, I like to stand up and take a bow. This really has been a group effort, and we're very fortunate to have such talented people. And I would be remiss if I did not thank Delegate Vanessa Atterbury, who introduced this bill in the state legislature and shepherded it for us last legislative session. Yes, I see spirit fingers back there, Delegate Atterbury, in case you're watching this. And we do really appreciate everybody in our state delegation who voted in favor of this bill and enabled us to pass this tonight and get to the point where we can truly give the school district more money for construction. And on that, I vote a really big yes.
Ms. Welsh?
There were 4 sponsors on this bill when it was originally filed in August, and no amendment before this council tonight was sponsored by more than 2 people. We had a majority of 3 people to carry this bill to the finish line as it was proposed, and it was not proposed lightly. Although I did not take the laboring oar to draft the initial legislation, Certainly, everyone relied extraordinarily heavily on the auditor's office in justifying those numbers, in testing the rationale, and asking the questions, and coming up to the figure, which was 680 when we started this exercise. I came in as a co-sponsor knowing that that was 680 and that 4 of us on this council were going to hold the line. And I did not hear, again tonight, any indication that less than 3 of us could not have done that. This bill is a compromise that was unnecessary, and I am disappointed in it. It could have been monumental. It should have been monumental. I'm not sure that it was. I see why legislators do not vote for the bills that they initially end up sponsoring. I'm not going to do that tonight, but I assure you that I do not accept and am not in any way satisfied with an argument that this is better, this is slightly better than what we had before. That is not good enough. It's not good enough on school impact surcharges. It's not good enough on so many things that come before this council. My vote is a very disappointed yes.
And Mr. Youngman.
So any policy or law or decision that we make up here that one stakeholder feels like they got everything they wanted and other stakeholders feel like they got nothing, I actually don't think we're doing our jobs. I think it's our jobs to listen to all those voices and come down on the right line. This wasn't a sort of 50-50 compromise where we went after 2 million and we ended up with 100. We ended up with probably 190 or 195. We gave a little bit. Every policy that doesn't crush a developer or a landowner or a home builder isn't a giveaway, and it's not happening because of some conspiracy or payoff. Sometimes we just need to balance what's going to keep, what's the best policy for the county. We've gotten some emails lately telling us to have courage to vote the bill as written with no amendments. Well, it also took some courage for people to knowing that they're going to get cyberbullied tonight by people who usually have a pretty thin understanding of the facts. It took some courage for people to make some compromises and try to see it through the lens of some other folks. Everybody up here, most people up here, spend all weekend dealing with personal attacks. We got an email today telling us not to get bullied, which was ironically from somebody who bullied us all weekend. So much misinformation out there, folks. If you're listening, please stop getting your facts off Facebook. It's terrible. Some of the numbers that were flying around as late as 6 p.m. tonight were so grossly on another planet. And it's unfair to the public. If you're a thought leader out there, stop doing that. Stop taking advantage of people for your own personal agenda. This bill isn't perfect. The development community ain't going to be happy about it. The folks that wanted it to be $8 or $10 with no exceptions aren't going to be happy about it. But I think we raised close to $200 million for school construction tonight, and I vote yes.
All right. That means that Council Bill 42, as amended, passes unanimously. This concludes our legislative session. Thank you, and have a good night.